Well, good morning. We're going to be talking today about the role of culture and community in your spiritual journey. And you might say to yourself, why? Why are we talking about culture or community when your spirituality is such a profoundly individual journey? And it is. There are some spaces that are yours to take alone. And I'll get into the archetypal uh, thing of that. But also, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so you may have noticed that until you were a relative adult, you probably had the same spiritual traditions as your parents, or a spiritual tradition that was common in your country of origin or among your friend group, etc. And that happens because of your environment. It happens because of your culture, your community. It's not like a flaw, right? And so a lot of times what tends to happen is that you will either, this is where the road diverges, as Robert Frost says in his poem, you will either continue to follow the path that was modeled for you through your culture, community, family of origin, et cetera, and you'll just continue along that path because that's what's easiest. Or you will diverge and you'll have to at some point confront the sense of guilt or the sense of maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I am a heathen, or maybe I am making a mistake or something. You're going to have to confront the decision that you've made to go a different way. It takes a certain level of breaking the gravitational pull of context in order for you to go your different way. Has anybody experienced that? Put a one in the chat if you have experienced that in any capacity, not just with your spiritual journey, but if you've experienced it when somebody wanted you to be a lawyer and you decided that you wanted to be an artist, or you said you didn't want children and somebody was like, what? Yeah, the best thing to do is to be a mother, or to be a father, or whatever, right? So somewhere where you kind of went your own way. First, I salute you for doing that. I see the ones in the chat. And secondly, it comes with its own set of challenges. One of the reasons why it is so easy to do what the culture says is because there's already a gravitational pull there, right? Of, collective consciousness, et cetera, et cetera. I want to make sure that my audio is good. Is my audio good? For some reason, I'm getting some.
It's good. It's good.
Okay. All right. Great. So there's a gravitational pull already there just by virtue of collective consciousness, just by virtue of this is what's popular or this is what's commonly accepted, et cetera, et cetera. We do this everywhere as human beings. It's the reason why it was commonly accepted that the earth was flat at a certain moment during scientific, or let's not call it scientific. Let's call it European exploration of science. There are a group of people who thought that the earth was flat only because they hadn't seen it, right? Not because it wasn't proven, et cetera, et cetera. And so what you want to do in your own spiritual journey is to sit with yourself for the decisions that you are making and decide where those decisions are coming from. Are those decisions coming from a place of exploration, of curiosity, of really honing in on your inner truth, your intuition, your own divine downloads? Or are they coming from, let's get on to get along? Again, not because get along is wrong. I'm not setting those apart because they're wrong. I'm setting those apart because they have a different come from. And you get to choose. And there are some places when you're like, you know what, I don't get to pick my battles. So for example, let me give you an example of what this looks like in terms of choosing your own way and still honoring culture and community. In the Dominican Republic, we do not celebrate Thanksgiving in November. That is an American holiday. And when we first came to this country, we wanted to be American as apple pie. And we wanted to adopt all the traditions, and we wanted to kind of like assimilate into whatever America had going on. It wasn't until I became an adult that I realized, oh, Thanksgiving is actually a state-sanctioned holiday that celebrates genocide. Huh, what am I doing celebrating genocide when it was my people that was genocided? And so for a long time, I didn't celebrate Thanksgiving. And it took me thinking about why would I celebrate a day of giving thanks, and made it my own tradition with my family, with now my sister and I, who are now the mothers, and kind of like taking on traditions in our family and setting traditions for our children, and for me, my grandchildren, etc. And so, it's not the thing itself that I'm asking you to turn away from. It's get grounded on your why, right? Because to this day, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. And it's because I'm doing that with an awareness. I'm doing that deliberately. It is a deliberate choice. It's not just because I want to assimilate to this larger culture, or whatever the case may be. It's because I want a different narrative. Yeah? And so you might have some places where that also exists for you. There have been some conversations that I've had, for example, with Sorel. Sorel and I both grew up in the Caribbean, in the same islands, by the way, on opposite sides. I grew up on the Dominican side. He grew up on the Haitian side. And, in most of Latin American and Caribbean countries, we are very Catholic, darling. Very, very Catholic. And it is deeply frowned upon to deviate from that. Anything that is outside of the traditions of Catholicism are looked upon as evil, dark arts, witchery, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't just come to find out, because I've done the research, come to find out that doesn't just come from wanting to adhere to a particular religious faith. It also comes from anti-Blackness. It also comes from taking away the authority and the value and the veracity and the effectiveness of some of those traditions and beliefs and rituals that were common in African traditional religions. Hoodoo, voodoo, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, there's a lot. This is what I find so interesting, because humanity is just, all over ourselves. We're really just a quilt, and we cross threads with one another. And so in Spanish, when you speak Spanish, if any of you speak Spanish, you'll know what I mean. There are a lot of words in Spanish that come from the Arab culture and Arabic as a language. Azúcar, you probably heard Celia Cruz saying azúcar, right? That comes from Arabic. Pantalones, Arabic. I mean, I can give you a gazillion examples of Spanish words that actually come from an Arabic etymological root. And there's a lot of that kind of like trickle down that happens in our religious traditions as well. And you already know this, because if you've been here any amount of time, you know that I go to Egypt to take a group of people to mystery school. And they are shocked and amazed and relieved to find out that the Christological story, the story of a child was born in a manger to a virgin and he grew up to be the savior of the world, is actually a storyline that has been happening for 100,000 years before the birth of Christ. Every tradition, every culture before them had some version of that. And you can find the origins of that story in the temples in Egypt, when Haru, or in the Greek alliteration, Horus, was actually in charge of his own birth when Isis was immaculately impregnated by the dead Osiris. And so when that conversation happens, I have a mutual on TikTok that I follow, and she says, your cognitive dissonance is going to shut off your critical thinking. I need you to stick with me for a second. And so a lot of times what happens is when I tell people this, it's like, nah, your Christ is actually junior. He comes from a long line of, messianic character. It blows their mind. They're like, no, it can't be true because this is so sacred. This is so unique. This is so da da da. It must have been that this, what you saw in earlier cultures was just the prophecy of this one. They said that too about those other ones. And so when you start to go down the rabbit hole, trust me, I already did it. I did it for you. When you go down the rabbit hole, then you have to come to a fork on the road of, am I going to believe something just because of repetition or because it's socially accepted? Or am I going to believe something because it makes sense to me? It speaks to my soul. And because I have audited the history behind it and I have decided this is where I'm going. The parallels between our relationship with our parents and our relationship to God cannot be denied. As a human being, when you're very, very little, I'm talking about like in utero, like just born kind of thing, your God is mom. Mom gives you sustenance. Mom is your world, really, right? Like if you imagine a baby in utero, like what else you got to do except stay alive in there, and mom is giving you everything that you need. Right? In fact, you inherit some of mom's traits when she was pregnant with you. If mom had a stressful pregnancy, you're probably going to be a colicky baby. If mom was arguing up and down, you're probably going to think that you have to fight for your right to exist. If the cord was wrapped around your neck when you were first born, you're going to think that you have to be careful with your words and that you have to fight to be heard. There's a lot of parallels between the ways in which we were born into this incarnation and the ways that we relate to our own power and to our connection to the divine. And so, in the same way, as you grow older, you realize, oh, mom is just a girl, a woman, a human being. She had a life before me, and she's gonna have a life after me. If I don't have, like, I'd live her first, right? And so, in the same way, our relationship with God is like, at first, you can't question God. Just like, do as you're told. Mommy told you to pick up your shoes, you gotta pick up your shoes, otherwise you're gonna get punished, otherwise you're gonna get a demerit, otherwise you're gonna get sent to your room, etc. So we have this relationship, this consequence relationship with our parents. Eventually you grow older and you become a parent, and now you have a peer relationship with your mom or with your dad. Not that you don't respect them, not that you dismiss them or that they don't have any kind of authority of their own. There's still some kind of deference there because they're your parental unit, but you got this. You don't need their approval or their love or their validation or even their attention for your survival like you did when you were first born. And it's the same thing that happens with God. There comes a point when you are questioning certain things, and when you question certain things, that does not put your survival at risk. No. In fact, it is your questioning that deepens the intimacy that you have with the divine. And there's a quote in Isaiah that says that, "Come, let us reason together." Right? And so I used to always lean on that particular Bible verse when I was going through grad school, because I was like, the only people that are insulted about me questioning these things are the people who don't want their faith to be threatened. God is not diminished by my asking questions. And so I want to open the conversation up to, I want to hear from you about how culture or your community has influenced your faith and your spiritual journey. And at what point did it become an individual walk for you? Florence says in the chat, someone just made me an enemy because I told them that I believe the earth is much older than 6,000 years old. Yeah. I questioned God about something in the Bible, and the answer accelerated my spiritual growth. See, there you go. Like, God is afraid of your questions, ma'am, sir. Laura says, I share to the questioning, ask and you get answers. You have your hand up, Laura. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yes, I
Hi.
do. Good morning, and thank you for this conversation. How my culture impacted my spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was brought up in the church from baby until age 11
Mm-hmm.
when I escaped. But it was due to questioning. I was experiencing grief at the time
Mm.
and inner rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
So all that questioning and curiosity had me walking away.
Mm-hmm.
And in my quest to get answers to a dream, it led me down some paths of mind science, just curiosity, wanting answers to how, well, thoughts work. Because I had a dream when my father died at 6, and the thought that was transferred, I was experiencing his pain. And I, wanted to know how this worked.
Mm-hmm.
So that just sent me on this journey, just trying to find out an answer. And I've gone on many paths. I've gone into all different paths just to find an answer. But um, during an hurricane in 1987, at that time I was in activism, political activism. I was advocate, well, I was agnostic, might be whatever going through. But that hurricane woke me up to the power that it is greater than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly before that hurricane, I had found a book in a desk of one of my co-workers who was a Rosicrucian. And I had started to read this book about the power of thoughts and all of that. And then the hurricane. And it's like suddenly I'm on this journey, rediscovering my higher self. And since then, I'm still on the path. End up back now into mind science,
Mm-hmm.
really, spiritual community. And I'm like, the circle it comes full circle.
Mm-hmm.
So I've like co-created my own path through questioning and curiosity. With that, I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's clear. That's clear. Florence, you have something?
Yes. I remember at 47 years old is when I actually, you know, clearly asked the question. I was reading the Bible from the beginning to the end. I was really just reading every single day. I'm reading. And then I came across this thing. I said, well, I have a problem with this. Like I'm talking to my source as as if I'm speaking with you. And I said, well, I don't understand this. I have a problem with this. How could you that and that and this and that and that? I was like this, right? I was asking this question. How could you
Mm-hmm.
say this to them? And like, were you asking them to steal? And I'm like, I don't understand this. And then the answer came to me one day like a conversation. Do you remember you asked that question? I
Mm-hmm.
was not asking anybody to steal. I was asking them to take back what the enemy had taken from them.
Mm-hmm.
And then came another part of the conversation that said, and yes, my child, just you, I will return to you all that has been stolen from you, just like in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that began, like that accelerated my spiritual journey. And just recently, I realized I was 47 when I had that experience. and I'm 67 right now. It seems as though this is the moment when that promise that, well, I will return all that the enemy has stolen. This moment is a moment when that promise is being answered in my life.
Oh, wow, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You've got something? Hi, Stan.
Hey, oh, hi, Dr. Ogando. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that, Mastermind Florence, and all of you. For me, what it was just being exposed to different thought, different thinking. There was a guy who was in a very guy I love to this day. Haven't seen him in I don't know how many years, maybe more than 50 years. And he was a Muslim, devout Orthodox Muslim, and he was in parent. He had a position in my high school, and he was such a charismatic and smooth guy, and wore traditional garb and everything, and everybody loved Bilal. And he spoke to us about Islam. And when he spoke to us about Islam, we realized that there was different thinking, because I was just brought up in Christianity and holiness, as it was called. So we start to realize that there's different thinking, and how wonderful and how much sense even that thinking made. That everything isn't just the thinking that you have been exposed to.
Right.
So that's where it started with me.
Did it make you question your faith, or did it amplify
absolutely.
or like expand?
Absolutely. Yeah, it made me both question a lot of things that didn't resonate well with me, and in fact were difficult to understand in Christianity. It made me seek out more to learn, get more answers there, as well as to get more answers, regarding and to see the contrasts and the different schools of thought, and to look into others. And ultimately came to make me realize that truth is everywhere, and the creative intelligence doesn't think the way we do, and didn't just put all his truth just one place. And if you don't get it right here, then you missed it, because this is the only place you could get it. It's just that it made me question a lot, and it made me seek a lot more. So I'm so glad I got those contrasts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that thank you for that, Stan. I really appreciate your share. I think that questioning my religious tradition actually got me closer to God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I heard in what you shared as well. And so that's a great distinction, because I don't like the glare that these glasses have, because I want you to see my face, not my glasses. That's a great distinction, because then you can get really down to the nitty-gritty of what your faith really is about, and what you're actually putting your faith in. There comes a point after a while where you're not putting your faith in something outside of yourself. It graduates from being a faith, like it's unsubstantiated, to being a belief, which is really just a repeated calcified thought, to then it becomes a knowingness that nobody can tell me nothing different, because I already know this, I lived it, I saw it, I've experienced it, etc. Right? And so this is what happens it's the same thing with our parents. If you notice, the relationship is inversely proportional. At the beginning of our lives, mom is everything. And then as you get older, you start kind of like individuating, and then kind of like, oh, you see their flaws, and you see that they don't have it all together, and they're trying to figure it out too. And so you give them a little grace and so forth. And before you know it, you can take it or leave it. Mom is, her own person and her own journey, and you're not attached, right? And so you went from positioned and knowingness, and this is tantamount to my survival, to giving grace and being somehow philosophically, or even maybe even emotionally detached from that person, because you can see them as a person and not just as something that means something to you. The inverse is true of God, that at the beginning, We just know God because somebody said it, because somebody taught it, because somebody exposed it, and so forth. And the more that you get exposed, then it's that same knowing that you had at the beginning of your life about mom, you have it at your mature level of faith with God. It's like, I ain't got, you ain't got to tell me nothing. I already know. Right? And so, and in that, there comes a great, yeah, Florence says, I now live in the knowing. Absolutely. And then in that, there comes a certain point of like, I don't need convincing, and I'm not committed to convincing you. You get to see what you get to see by the way that I live my life, by the way that I treat other human beings, by my relationship with the planet, by my moving and dancing with my own culture, my own community, etc. Because, as we know from universal laws, the macro is contained in the micro, and the micro is contained in the macro. As above, so below, as below, so above. So, it's also what, if you guys are familiar with verses in the Bible, that's why Jesus is quoted as saying, whatsoever you do to the least of these, you also do unto me. And the deeper metaphysical meaning of that phrase is that you know what your character is made of by how you treat people that you can't benefit from. You know what your character is made of by how you treat people you can't benefit from. It makes sense that you would be kind to your boss. That person signs your checks. It makes sense that you would be kind to mom. Depending on your age, that woman is in charge of your food and your survival, and etc. Or dad, he's in charge of paying your dues or whatever the case may be. But what do you do with a random stranger? How do you treat that person? How do you treat yourself? Let's get in the Kool-Aid. How do you treat yourself in the darkness of your own mind? Who do you say that you are when no one's looking? You know your shadows better than anybody. You know your dark spots better than anybody. You know your flaws and your where you have fallen short, et cetera, et cetera. Can you still be kind and graceful to yourself? Can you show yourself mercy? Not let yourself off the hook. That's different. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, can you be as merciful and graceful for yourself the same way that you would want a divine being to be graceful and merciful with you? And so part of what we learn about kindness, we learn in our family, we learn in community, we learn in our culture. Most melanated cultures are rooted in community. In fact, I would venture to say all of them, except I don't know all of them, but that's a good guess. Rooted in community, rooted in what I do reflects on the people I represent. And that's how we kind of lived our life in my family of origin too. That it's like, when you go out there, you're representing the Ogando family. So don't act a fool, right? And in the same way, those cultures, particularly the European or particularly the Western patriarchal misogynistic culture, is very comfortable with othering people and separating ourselves from that which we do not approve. And so it's easy then to, when you've othered and dehumanized another human being, it's easy to subjugate them. It's easy to kill them. It's easy to, not be affected by the things that affect them. But if you've noticed anything, and I'm talking to the sociology majors in the audience, you will notice that which you do to the least of these eventually does happen to you. It's just a matter of time. And if you've allowed unspeakable crimes to be done to the least of these, it's just a matter of time before that rule, that law, that way of being gets hoisted upon you. And so, if for nothing else, for self-preservation, let's look out for one another. I love you very much. Remember, of course, all of our metrics: love, laugh, give of yourself, give of your time, energy, and attention. Eat more plant-based, stress less, sleep at least 7 to 8 hours every day, preferably 9. Just live a little, you know what I mean? And then, of course, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Always audit your assumptions. That'll get you out of a lot of trouble. We love you very much. See you next time.
Thank
Thank,
Love you all.
thank you,
Have a
Doc.
great
Thank you.
day.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Love.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Have a
One
great